Hello and welcome to PMQs with Graham Hughes. Let's get into it, shall we? One sec. There we go. Lovely, still there.
To the point where it's becoming difficult for colleagues to hear what is being said clearly. And there has been an escalation in unhelpful exchanges across the floor of the House from sedentary positions and the attempted use of props. Some of the language used in questions has also fallen short of the standards and good temper and moderation that should characterise the proceedings of this House. I know there is a general election approaching, but I would urge honourable members on both sides of the House to exercise greater self-restraint in their choice of words and in their general behaviour, both when they are asking a question and when they are not. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Joanna Cherry.
Number one, please, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday I met the families of Grace O'Malley Kumar, Barnaby Webber and Ian Coates, who were killed in Nottingham. I assured them that we would do whatever it takes to get the answers that they want. And Mr. Speaker, following constructive dialogue over past months, I welcome the significant steps the DUP have taken to make restoration of the executive possible. I also thank the other political parties in Northern Ireland for the patience that they have shown. After 2 years without an executive, there is now the prospect of power sharing back up and running, strengthening our union, giving people the local accountable government that they need, and offering a brighter future for Northern Ireland. My right honourable friend, the Northern Ireland Secretary, will be making a statement shortly. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I met with a constituent who was employed not by the post office, but by a supermarket who operated a franchise post office. She was wrongly accused of dishonesty as a result of the faulty Horizon system, and she was put through a disciplinary process by her employers, the supermarket. This has had a very profound impact on her life. She's not alone, there are others in her position, and yet there's no provision for compensating people who worked in franchise post offices like her. Will the Prime Minister give me a commitment to include these victims in the Horizon scandal compensation scheme?
Well, first of all, can I say I'm very sorry to hear about the Honourable Lady's constituent's case. As I've said, this was an awful miscarriage of justice, and everyone affected deserved not just justice but also compensation and answers. I'll make sure that we look into the precise details of her constituent's case, and surely there will be others like that, and make sure that the Minister gets back to her with all due haste.
Henry Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sustainable aviation fuel plays a significant part in the sector's decarbonisation. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, commit to further policies for a SAF mandate to generate greater demand, for a revenue support mechanism such as other sectors, solar and wind power generation as well, and so that work starts by the end of next year on the 5 promised sustainable aviation plants here in the UK?
Prime Minister.
I can give my honourable friend the assurance that we are committed to ensuring the SAF mandate will be in place by 2025, and by mandating the use of sustainable aviation fuel, not only will we be able to deliver carbon savings, but also create a brand new UK market. And as one of the steps in introducing the revenue certainty mechanism that he talked about by 2026, DfT will be consulting in the spring this year on options for how that should work in practice.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in welcoming the DUP statement about the return of the Northern Ireland Executive? This is an important moment, and we now need all sides to work together to get Stormont back up and running for the people of Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, I too met the families of Grace, Barnaby and Ian on Monday, and it's impossible to express in words the horror that they've been through and continue to go through. We must all redouble our efforts to do everything that we can to help them with their campaign. And of course, Mr. Speaker, this week, 2 young lives, 16-year-old Max and 15-year-old Mason, were taken in Bristol. And I know the whole House will join me in sending condolences to their families and their friends. Mr. Speaker, one of the most difficult experiences for any member of this House is speaking to those at the sharp end of this government's cost of living crisis. So nobody could fail to be moved by the plight of the member for Mid-Norfolk. His mortgage has gone up £1,200 a month. He's been forced to quit his dream job to pay for it. A Tory MP counting the cost of Tory chaos. After 14 years, have we finally discovered what they meant when they said, "We're all in this together"?
Well, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the mortgage charter that the Chancellor introduced last year, millions of mortgage holders across the country are benefiting from support with their mortgages, because it's important, rather than take the approach that the honourable gentleman just did, is actually focus on the practical support in place to help people. who do need help, and someone on a typical mortgage is able to now save hundreds of pounds thanks to those reforms. And actually, what we have recently seen is mortgage applications now at a multi-month high as a result of confidence returning. But if he really cared about helping people with the cost of living, Mr. Speaker, he would actually do more to celebrate and acknowledge the fact that thanks to our plan, millions of working people will now start to pay hundreds of pounds less in tax from this month's pay slips, Mr. Speaker. But we all know that's not a priority for him. He said he wanted to back people with the cost of living, but now he has described tax cuts, I read, as salting the earth. His shadow chancellor, it seems, is equally confused. In Davos, she said she did back tax cuts, but back here in Westminster, she called them a scorched earth policy. She obviously can't decide which Wikipedia page to copy this week.
Mr. Speaker, for every £2 he says he's giving people back, he's taking £10 out of their back pocket in higher tax, and he thinks they should be dancing in the street and thanking him. There are 200,000 people, Prime Minister, just like the member for Mid-Norfolk, coming off fixed-rate mortgages and paying more each and every month because they crashed the economy.
Yes.
Does the Prime Minister actually know how much their monthly repayments are going up by?
Prime Minister, as I said, Mr. Speaker, someone on a typical mortgage of about £140,000 with 17 years left is currently paying around £800 as a result of the ability to extend their mortgage term or switch to a 6-month only interest-only mortgage. They will be able to save hundreds of pounds, and that is someone on the average mortgage, Mr. Speaker. But again, Mr. Speaker, he says he cares about the cost of living. The thing that would have the biggest impact on everyone's cost of living is the fact that his ideas to spend £28 billion, which we had just confirmed this morning by Shadow Treasury Minister, I heard, confirmed that they remain committed to them, but he has no plan to pay for this £28 billion, Mr. Speaker. No plan at all. And that's typical Labour economics, because they want to keep the spending but drop the payment plan. And I actually saw at the weekend their former leader, his mentor, was clear that they'll make their sums add up with tax rises on people's assets.
Oh, again,
their homes, their pensions and their businesses. It's the same old Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. No plan and back to square one with higher taxes.
He said it. Back to square one.
They've crashed the economy, mortgages are through the roof, they've doubled the debt, and he thinks he can stand there and lecture other people about fiscal responsibility. But he didn't answer the question. Hundreds of thousands of people are coming off fixed-rate mortgages and facing huge mortgage increases. And the Prime Minister won't even do them the courtesy of answering the question. No, he didn't. So I'll ask him again.
I was very clear at the beginning, and I mean that my constituents to hear, if yours don't, please leave.
Does the Prime Minister have any idea how much mortgages are going up by this month for those coming off fixed-rate mortgages?
Prime Minister. Well, again, I'll just point him back to my previous answer, Mr. Speaker. As I went him through, everyone's situation will be different. And someone on a typical mortgage of around £140,000, who's currently paying £800, will be able to keep their mortgage payment essentially the same by using the facilitations that the Chancellor has put in place. But again, that's what we've done to help people, Mr. Speaker. But again, it's incumbent on him to explain to the British public how his policy of decarbonising the grid by 2030 is going to be funded. He won't give the answers, but helpfully the Shadow Energy Secretary popped up at the weekend in an interview in the Sunday Times. He said they don't need a plan to pay for it, Mr. Speaker, because in his words it will produce real savings and it makes clear economic sense. Now, the Shadow Leader here doesn't want to talk about it at all, but let me tell him, I see all these years later it's the same story. The Right Honourable Member for Doncaster North has carved a promise in stone and everyone else just looks away in embarrassment.
Mr. Speaker, he just doesn't get it. They crashed the economy, mortgages skyrocketing, doubling the debt. They say they're going to max out the government's credit card at the next budget, and he won't.
Order. I think the Chief Whip's getting very carried away. He doesn't want to lead everybody for a cup of tea, does he? Come on!
He said it! It's the tea!
They have forfeited the right to be lecturing others about the economy. Well, somebody coming off a fixed-rate mortgage is going to be paying an average of £240 more each and every month. A constant reminder that working people are paying the price for the damage that they've done to the economy. This week, I met one of the employees at Iceland in Warrington, Phil. I'm sure Phil would be...
Order. Mr. Gibson. Sorry. Mr. Starmer. Order. The same voice keeps appearing again. It won't appear anymore. So I'm just letting you know now. Keir Starmer.
Laughing at an employee at Iceland who's struggling with his mortgage. Shame. He told me that his mortgage is going up by a staggering £1,000 a month, Prime Minister. He doesn't want other averages, other people, other stories. That's what's happening to him. If the member for Mid Norfolk on £120,000 can't afford this Tory government, how on earth can people like Phil?
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the management of the economy, Phil and millions... I think
Management of the economy.
Phil and millions of people like him are now ensuring that inflation is less than half of the rate that it was when we were talking a year ago. Putting more money in their pocket. And thanks to this government, Phil and millions of other workers, not just at Iceland but across the country, are benefiting this month in their pay packet for a tax cut worth hundreds of pounds for someone on an average salary. But I hope he explained to Phil.
Not even real.
He explained to Phil the cost of his policies. Did he explain to Phil? Did he explain to Phil how Phil is going to have to pay for his £28 billion green spending spree?
Oh, he said it again.
How it's going to cost
£28
Phil
billion
in higher
He's
taxes,
obsessed.
more coming out of his pay packet. And did he explain to Phil that he'd be better off sticking with our plan rather than going back to square one with him?
Investment. Green investment.
I would invite the Prime Minister to get in touch with Phil and explain to him how paying £1,000 more on his mortgage...
Oh, hello. Sorry.
...on his mortgage...
Oh, the CIA
is making him better off, because that's not how he feels. He's just so out of touch. It's unbelievable. Finding hundreds of pounds extra a month, that may not seem like a big deal to the Prime Minister. But let me tell him, most people don't have that sort of money knocking around. Yep. And if that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Speaker, this week he told every council in the country to put their council tax up by the maximum of 5%.
Yes.
That's 26 tax rises now, Prime Minister. And he says everything's fine, people are better off. But when people see their mortgages going up, their council tax going up, food prices still going up, who does he expect them to believe? His boasts or their bank account?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, I was puzzled because, again, he resorts, as always, to the politics of envy here. But after recently and repeatedly attacking not just me but the government for lifting the bonus cap, I was genuinely surprised to see that the Shadow Chancellor just today has announced that she now supports the government's policy on the bankers' bonus cap. I don't know if he mentioned that to Phil when he was having a chat with him, but I'm sure he can fill us in. But I can tell him that trust and economic credibility come from sticking to a plan. But it's becoming clear you cannot trust a word that he says. And again, when the Shadow Chancellor says or claims that they won't borrow much, they won't raise Phil's taxes, we now know that those promises simply, again, they just aren't worth the Wikipedia page they were copied from.
Oh my God, he's just doing the same jokes over and over again.
I actually didn't expect him to be laughing at Phil. I did not expect him to be laughing at Phil. Not addressing...
Order. Look, I made this statement very clear.
Like he laughed at the wall.
I don't... Prime Minister, it's very serious that we make sure that people hear, both you and the Leader of the Opposition. It matters to the people who watch the proceedings of this chamber, and it's not good in the behaviour that seems to be carried out. Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister just doesn't get how hard it is for millions of people across the country like Phil. That is the primary problem, struggling with their mortgages, their bills, the spiralling cost of living. And the Prime Minister's response is never to take responsibility, show contrition, or even any level of basic understanding. He's so detached, he thinks he can paint a world in which their problems simply don't exist. The problem is he can't even fool his own MPs, let alone anyone else. The member for Mid Norfolk says he's exhausted. He's looking forward to new opportunities outside of Parliament. Why doesn't the Prime Minister do him a favour, call an election, so he and the whole country can move on?
Oh, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But whether it's Phil, whether it's everyone else across the country, the plan that we're putting in place is working to help people, and we're making progress. Just this week, taking action to stop children from vaping. Just this week, ensuring that people can visit their pharmacies to get the healthcare they need, freeing up millions of GP appointments. And just this week, millions of working people starting to see hundreds of pounds of tax cuts delivered in their pay packet, Mr. Speaker. That is a plan that is working. All he's offering is £28 billion of tax rises.
Oh, we said it again! £28 billion!
It's a brighter future with us, or back to square one with them.
Oh, and he said back to square one as well! Oh my God! He just can't help himself.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister likes to attend live sport, and so I wonder whether he would join me in welcoming the decision of the Planning Inspector in upholding Rugby Council's rejection of an application for development at Brandon Stadium in my constituency to keep the doors open for it to remain a sporting venue, so that future generations will enjoy the thrills and spills of motorcycle speedway and stock cars.
I join my honourable friend in paying tribute and being proud of actually Britain's rich history in the automotive and motorsport sectors, and the stadium that he talks about is a historic motorsport venue, and whilst it's been a shame to see it fall into disrepair, I hope that the decision he refers to enables a possibility of both speedway and stock car racing to return, and I know that my honourable friend will rightly continue to champion this cause.
SNP Leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, when the Tories scrapped the cap on bankers' bonuses in the autumn during a cost of living crisis, the Labour Party rightly opposed it. Yet here we are, just 3 months later, and the Labour Party support scrapping the cap on bankers' bonuses. Shameful. But is the Prime Minister comforted by the fact that he's now no longer alone in this House on being completely out of touch with public opinion?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said at the time, we supported the decision of the independent regulator because this was the right thing for financial stability. But that, Mr. Speaker, is because on this side of the House, we have a set of convictions and we have a plan and we stick to it. But he's absolutely right to point out the flip-flopping and U-turning and no convictions of the party opposite.
After your mini-budget.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, scrapping the cap on bankers' bonuses was only made possible due to Brexit. So what the Westminster parties are now telling the public is that it's OK for bankers to have unlimited Brexit bonuses, but for the public sitting at home, struggling to feed their families, they have to suck up and deal with the additional food price costs as a result of Brexit red tape. That is the cost, and that is the reality of broken Brexit Britain. Isn't it the case that the great achievement of this Tory government is getting the Labour Party to agree to that bleak future?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're actually delivering benefits for people across Scotland, not just least in new free trade deals that are opening up markets for Scottish exporters, free ports that are attracting jobs and investment, the Brexit pubs guarantee, cutting the cost of a pint in Scottish pubs. But when he talks about the cost of living, Mr. Speaker, the thing that he could do most to help is make sure that Scotland isn't the highest tax part of the United Kingdom.
What are you talking about?
And it's not just for high earners, Mr. Speaker. Everybody earning £28,500 or more is paying more tax in Scotland than they would in England, thanks to the SNP.
That's some bullshit statistics right there.
Speaker, 1 punch thrown, 2 days on life support, then 3 children left without a father. A 4-year sentence handed down, released after 2, but 1 grieving mother has to live a life sentence of agony. Sentencing for one-punch killers is not working in this country. Does the Prime Minister agree that now is the time to finally introduce a specific offence and a tougher minimum sentence for one-punch manslaughter?
Prime Minister.
I pay tribute to the work my honourable friend has done in bringing attention to so-called one-punch manslaughter and highlighting, as she knows well, the anguish those cases cause for the families of the victims. And I know the Ministry of Justice has looked very carefully at the amendment that my honourable friend has proposed, and I know that she'll be meeting the Minister for Safeguarding shortly to both discuss her specific amendment and how we might best address the wider issue.
Sir Ed Davey.
Speaker.
David.
My constituent Millie, a wheelchair user, had a serious accident at a sporting event. Millie was left waiting on the floor in pain for over 2 hours before an ambulance arrived. During her months in hospital since, she's been dropped badly multiple times, left stuck in her bed for days at length. She's even been told to soil herself, and there's no one to take her to the toilet. Before all this, Millie was living independently and working, but the prospect of her returning to work is being destroyed by the crisis in the NHS and care system. I'm sure the Prime Minister will agree that no one should ever have to go through what Millie has, so will he look again at our proposals to make sure every patient gets the high-quality care they need?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very sorry to hear about Millie's case, and if there are specific aspects of it that need to be examined, I'm sure the Health Secretary will follow up with the Honourable Gentleman. And more generally, we want to make sure everyone gets the care they deserve, which is why we're not just investing record sums in the NHS, but ensuring that there are record numbers of doctors, nurses, and new innovative forms of treatment like surgical hubs and virtual wards, all of which is showing that ambulance times that he mentioned are lower today than they were this time last year.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The #1 reason for children's hospital admissions in North Devon is for dental treatment. We have no NHS capacity and no orthodontist in Barnstable. Our dentists cannot recruit, even with large golden hellos. The emergency dental plan does seem to have been stuck at the Treasury forever. My right honourable friend used his spare set of keys and pop round and rescue it for us, please. My constituents and I would be ever so grateful.
Sorry. Prime Minister.
My honourable friend has rightly championed the provision of
mic a bit closer.
We're investing £3 billion a year, and the reformed contracts in dentistry from the NHS have improved access while ensuring fairer remuneration for dentists, and we're also providing more financial support for those who need it the most. So around half of the course of treatment last year were delivered to those who are non-paying, both adults and children. But yes, more needs to be done, and that's why our dentistry recovery plan will be published shortly.
I'm going to be using this graphic a lot, aren't I?
Mr. Speaker. More than 2 decades ago, the then Prime Minister Tony Blair misled this House by promoting and endorsing the Post Office Horizon IT system as perfect,
horrific
protecting
human
the
being.
large corporation that created it and causing untold harm and damage and misery to innocent people.
Have you been in charge since
Can the
2010?
current Prime Minister think of anything he has promoted in partnership with huge businesses as safe and effective, which has ultimately harmed the British people? And will he use this opportunity to correct that safe and effective statement, or will he choose the same line as Tony Blair? Sit back, do nothing, and let the misery just continue to pile up.
Oh, piss off, you horrible gammon.
Mr. Speaker, as we've been clear, the Horizon scandal is a terrible miscarriage of justice, and we're doing everything that we can to make it right. To what he was more broadly insinuating, let me be unequivocal from this dispatch box that COVID vaccines are safe, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Jill Gideon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Didn't have an anti-vax animation, and that was going to be allowed.
The Horizon scandal highlighted the Post Office's financial incompetence, and my right honourable friend will know that the public's confidence in the institution is at an all-time low. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that, as high street banks are closing branches across the country, we should look to developing new community banking solutions rather than giving the Post Office sole responsibility for providing access to cash and other banking services in poorly served neighbourhoods?
I agree. I often agree with the Conservatives, but that's
I thank my honourable friend for a question, but I also just say that we shouldn't mistake conflating this scandal with the actions of many hard-working local postmasters and sub-postmasters, because customers can access cash and banking services through a wide range of channels, including a contract with the Post Office counter service, which does provide a valuable channel. And that I agree with her, though, the importance of it to protect that as part of the recent Financial Services and Markets Act, and ensures that the vast majority of people should be no more than 3 miles away from such a cash point.
John Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the Nolan principles, integrity, states that holders of public office should not act to gain material benefits for themselves, their family or their friends. Prime Minister, on the 6th of January, you tweeted a link to the Conservative Party website which seemed to scrape people's data and place unwanted cookies on their machines. The Good Law Project is now pursuing. Can the Prime Minister
Sorry, I've just got to stop there because we've got Andrew Banner in the chat who's just said, Graham, I think you should listen to Bridgen on vaccine harm. First of all, I can't state this enough. Fuck you. Secondly, fuck you. My partner is deaf because she couldn't have a measles vaccine as a child. So they relied on herd immunity for other parents to vaccinate their children. Some of them didn't. And since the age of 4, she's been deaf. And it's been horrible for her. Every step of her life has been more difficult. You imagine living your life without being able to make a phone call. Try and organise something. How about how you have a night out with your mates, but you can't because you can't bloody hear anything. You can't understand what anyone's saying to you. Try having a drink and try and lip read in a club. You're not going to be able to. No one can do that. Try going to the cinema. You can't because there's no fucking subtitles on any of the fucking movies. Also, my sister died of cervical cancer, something that isn't happening now with people in their 20s, women in their 20s, because we've got the HPV vaccination. So seriously, mate, get the fuck off this channel. I don't want you here. Piss off. Go and watch someone else's anti-vax bullshit. It is not welcome here.
Can the Prime Minister assure the House that no laws have been broken by his party?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, of course our party follows all laws.
Robert Jenrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a first responsibility for government is to fix the housing crisis that young people didn't cause. 3 years ago, we dragged house building in this country up to the highest level since 1987, after the last Labour government left it at its lowest level since the 1920s. But house building
Sorry, this is not supposed to be so sweary.
We need to do more. Will my right honourable friend consider using the budget to do as he and I did together during the pandemic and cut stamp duty to boost housing starts, to reignite the economy and to support thousands of businesses across our country?
Prime Minister.
Well, my right honourable friend is right to point out that since 2010 we have delivered 2.5 million additional homes, on track to deliver 1 million just in this Parliament, and help over 850,000 families into home ownership through schemes such as Help to Buy and Right to Buy. Obviously, tax decisions are a matter for the Chancellor, but I would point out that our existing stamp duty relief for first-time buyers ensures the vast majority of first-time buyers in our country pay absolutely no stamp duty.
Marshall Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The APPG on eye health and visual impairment has today published polling that found that nearly half of employers exclude blind and partially sighted people from their workplaces, and 1 in 4 said that they would not be willing to make workplace adjustments. The disability employment gap remains stubbornly at 30%, and the pay gap means that blind and partially sighted people effectively work for free for 47 days of the year. So will the Prime Minister meet with me and sight loss organisations to discuss how we can create a more inclusive workforce?
Prime Minister.
Well, I share the Honourable Lady's ambition to have an inclusive workforce, and the record in supporting those with disabilities into work over the past several years has been incredibly strong. I know this is something that the Work and Pension Secretary is actively looking at and making sure that our accessibility plan is up to date and inclusive, and I'll ensure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister.
Mr. Speaker, having visited recently, I know that Israel remains in shock following the rape, murder and butchery of Hamas. All of us want to see a peaceful and demilitarised Palestinian state. However, Hamas remain in control in large parts of Gaza. Their support is growing in the West Bank. Nearly 2/3 of Palestinians in polling reject coexistence with Israel,
wonder why it might be growing?
has continued to promote hatred of Jews. Does my right honourable friend agree that any recognition of a Palestinian state must address these issues and can only come about as part of a negotiated settlement between Israel and the Palestinians?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, the government's position is clear. My honourable friend is right that there are steps and conditions that need to be put in place on this journey. First and foremost, the removal of Hamas from Gaza, a Palestinian-led government in Gaza and the West Bank, a concrete plan to reform and support the Palestinian Authority, a reconstruction plan for Gaza, and a two-state solution, which we have long supported. So let me be
why
clear.
don't you recognise Palestine then?
And the terrorist threat that they face must be eliminated.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Israel's
Recognise
lasting
Palestine.
security must be guaranteed.
You could do that today.
Mr.
Come on,
Speaker,
let's do it together.
on the 15th
Be fun.
of November last year, I appealed to the Prime Minister to choose de-escalation and peace over violence, death and destruction. He called me naive. So far, over 26,000 souls have perished in Gaza. Shameful. In a powerful and moving open letter in Monday's New York Times, the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council cited Deuteronomy. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, accusing President Biden of choosing death. If the Prime Minister won't listen to me or the ICJ, will he listen to the Rabbinical Council, or will he call them naive too?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've been clear multiple times that we are concerned,
Oh, he's been
deeply
clear.
concerned about the impact of the fighting in Gaza on the
Absolutely
civilian
clear.
population. Too many people have lost their lives, and there is a desperate need for increased humanitarian support in Gaza.
He
I
says
won't
that.
go over all the debates we've had about the conditions that are necessary for an immediate pause, leading to a
bugger
sustainable
all about
ceasefire.
it.
But I
Just give
can
us some
assure the House that we are
platitudes.
doing everything that we can to
No,
get
you are
more
not
aid
doing
into the
everything you
region as
can.
quickly as possible.
Billy Tolhurst.
Quite evidently not doing everything you
Chatham
can.
Docks supports over 800 local high-value jobs which are at risk as the owners are continuing in their pursuit to displace successful businesses such as ArcelorMittal Kent Wire. The Labour Council are failing to honour the commitment they made before the local elections to protect the docks and the jobs. Even their leader, the Right Honourable Member for Holborn and St Pancras, said he was proudly backing Save Chatham Docks campaign. Will my Right Honourable friend meet with me to see how we can protect the docks and save those jobs for my constituents? And isn't this just another example of how Labour and their leaders change their position depending on which way the wind blows?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has been a constant champion of Chatham Docks, and I am disappointed to hear that the local Labour Council are failing to honour the commitments that they've made. But also, she points out, I'm not surprised to see that the Leader of the Opposition has said one thing and then consequently done another.
Maybe the
docks
council had to
support
spend a
hundreds
lot
jobs,
of
and
money
I'm
on
calling on the council to
supplying
rethink
the
their
country
approach.
with
That
customs
completes Prime
regulations that we
Minister's
didn't used to need.
questions.
Customs facilities. Right, there you go. That's your lot. Bugger off. Right, okay. Anyway, so if I just head back to Big Graham. One sec. Right, there we go. Okay, so yeah, that was very typical, and I mean, you know, these prime minister questions are all kind of blaring into one for me. I mean, it's just like it's the same thing every week. Starmer will stand up and go, "You've ruined the economy," and the Rishi Sunak's got like 3 lines that he just trots out again and again. You saw on that clip there. You know, we had 3 times, I think it was, I had to use the 28 billion graphic because that's all he's got. You're going to spend 28 billion. You're going to spend 28 billion. Oh, where are you going to spend 28 billion? Where are you going to get the 28 billion from? Don't forget, the Tories spent 37 billion on a COVID app that didn't work. I mean, he's written off 10 billion in fraud. In fraud. Not just like, you know, a little bit of money that's gone out the petty cash. No, he has written off £10 billion worth of fraud that was committed by companies during the pandemic. And he's written it off. Labour want to have an investigation into it and try and claw some of that money back. But no, Rishi Sunak, he's happy of the decisions he made while Chancellor. I mean, if he finds out who was Chancellor through those years when the economy just absolutely tanked, I mean, he's going to be a bit upset with himself because he was the guy who was the Chancellor at that time before Nidham Kwasi Kwarteng decided that he would tank the economy even worse. And when I say it's tanked, like, the economy hasn't grown since 2007. I know I bang on about this a lot, but it is absolutely critical to understanding why we are where we are today. Our population has grown by over 10% in that time. It was about 60 million back in 2007. It is now around 68 million, so more than 10%, right? Our economy hasn't grown. It was around $3 trillion in 2007. It's about $3 trillion today. It is absolutely stagnated. And in real terms, it's gone down. So the proportion of money, GDP, and I know GDP is not a great way of sussing out a country's wealth, but it is indicative, at least. It used to be $50,000 per person in this country. Per capita, $50,000, right? Each. That includes women and children. Women and children. God, that's so sexist. That includes children who aren't working. That includes pensioners who aren't working. This is not the working population. This is every citizen of the United Kingdom. Newborn babies, right? It's gone down to 45,000. At the same time, the price of everything has almost doubled in that time. The price of a loaf of bread, a pint of milk, a pint of lager, it's all gone up. The cost of living has gone up. Mortgages have gone up. Rent has gone up almost exponentially. And yet, per person, we have less money than ever before. And on top of that, because of good old capitalism, unrestrained capitalism, let the market sort things out. There are more billionaires now than ever before. The number of billionaires went up during the pandemic. The people who were already rich got a lot richer. There's about 177 billionaires in this country now. So that $47,000 per person, it's actually wrong because that figure has been skewed by the handful of billionaires that for some reason our country is in hock to. I don't know. It's almost as if they own over 66% of the press and media in this country. I don't know. Maybe they own that much of the press and they can have their agenda pushed out on all their channels every day to millions of uncritically thinking saps, should we say? People who are, let's say, hard of thinking. I'm trying to be nice. But the fact is, the economy is in the gutter. The Tories have put it there. And each week, Keir Starmer stands up and says, the economy's in the gutter. It's all your fault. And then there's two responses to that. Either it's not in the gutter, we're doing a lot better than we were a year ago, which is so ridiculous. It's like you're punching someone in the face and they go, stop punching you in the face. It's all right, I'm punching you slower now. You're still punching me in the face. The other thing is, Labour will be worse. Yeah, but you're going to be spending 28 billion on green investments. Yes, we are. And I kind of wish that Starmer would own this. I mean, there's a lot of things it's like watching a movie, isn't it? Where you go, I wish they'd done this. Wish they ended it this way. Often when I watch Keir Starmer at PMQs, I'm thinking, oh, mate, say this, say that. Come back on that. But when he says about the 28 billion pounds that Labour's planning to invest in green infrastructure, in the green revolution, for every pound spent on that, we're going to get £3 back, £4, £5 back. It's like investing in any infrastructure. It's like investing, especially in public transport. You make money out of it, unless you're a bunch of corrupt arseholes like the Tories who run it all to make money for their mates rather than to provide a public service. See HS2 for details. Plumduff says, I just want a general election. I think there is probably about 40 million people in the country who absolutely agree with you right now. It is very painful living in this country right now with these absolute scumbags in charge, and we don't even know when we're going to get rid of them. At least with the Fixed Term Parliament Act, we could say, yes, the date of the election will be X, and we could prepare for it. But no, the Tories are going to play this little bait and switch thing where they go, oh, well, maybe we're going to have it in November, maybe we're going to have it in May, who knows? And it's like, okay, so you're making it so it's really difficult for the other political parties to organise things to a particular date. You were organising the release of a movie, for instance, is a good example. If you keep chopping and changing that date and saying, oh, well, it really impacts the movie, because if you've had the ads out for 3 years, by the time the movie comes out, everyone's forgotten about the ads that you spent all that money on, for instance. It just doesn't, uncertainty is the Tories. It's like what they want, especially when you look at what they've done with Brexit. They're like, yay, uncertainty. Let's make sure everyone's life is uncertain. Everyone can't know what's going to happen next year. No more jobs for life. You don't know if your bank account's going to be okay. You don't know if you're going to be able to pay your mortgage for the next 20 years. No certainty at all. It's the Tory way. And I'm sick, and I'm absolutely sick and tired of it. Now, the Tories are doing stuff to make it more difficult for Labour to win in the next election, because the Tories know their time is up, but they are trying their best to skew the results. So in our system at the moment, Labour need about 15% more votes than the Tories to basically win a majority, which is fundamentally unfair, and one of the reasons why we should get rid of first past the post as soon as possible. But also, the Tories are not just bringing voter ID, which is like, if you've got a young person's Oyster card, you can't use that as ID, but if you have an old person's Oyster card, you can use that as ID. And you're like, that seems immoral to me. They're also making it so that if you live in a foreign country, you can nominate someone in this country to vote on your behalf. And if you've lived abroad for more than 15 years, I'm sorry, but I don't feel like you should have a say in who is running this country anymore. I think you should have had a say in the EU referendum if you lived in Europe, because that affects you, especially if you're still a British citizen. But this one, for an election, no, just no. I don't see why someone who doesn't live in the city, that is getting a new mayor, gets to vote for the mayor. I don't live in Liverpool anymore. I don't get to vote for the mayor of Liverpool, right? I didn't get to vote for Steve Rotherham, right? On the last one. Because my address is now in Durham. And I think that's right. I think I can vote for the mayor of the North East or whatever it's going to be called. Yeah, I can do that. That's fine, because I live here. The idea that someone from Manchester should be able to vote for the mayor of Liverpool and vice versa is ridiculous. But that's what the Tories are trying to bring in. They're trying to make it so that people can vote in constituencies that they don't live in and haven't lived in for many, many years. It's an absolute disgrace. And so the Tories are doing everything in their evil little power to try and cling on to power. And you've seen it with them backing on the Fixed Term Parliament Act. You've seen it with the voter ID. You're seeing it now with this allowing people who haven't voted for years, decades maybe, to vote in the upcoming election. It might blow up in their face because people who live abroad are very, very upset about Brexit. I know. I've spoken to a lot of them. I've spoken to a lot of people, British immigrants who live, they call themselves expats, but they're immigrants, who live in other countries. And it doesn't have to be a European country. And I've met people who live in Central America who are from Britain who are pissed off because their pension doesn't arrive anymore, or it's a quarter of what it was because of the Tories' mismanagement of the economy. So, I mean, there's so many things going on here, but the most essential thing that we've all got to sort of recognise is that the Tories are a bunch of sleazebags who are going to try every dirty trick in the book to make it so that they cling on to as many seats as possible. And one of the big things they've done quietly last November, without telling anyone, they didn't even put it through Parliament, was that they more than doubled, I think, the amount that political parties are allowed to spend on elections, which benefits the Tories because they have very, very wealthy backers. You know, there's 177 billionaires that I mentioned. Yeah, they're probably all Tories. And so we've got the money and the power and the control of the media on one side, and you've got Labour on the other. And so I'm not going to join into this chorus of, oh God, we've got to get rid of Keir Starmer. He's the worst thing ever. They're 20 points ahead in the polls. He's doing an all right job because his job at the moment is to get the Tories out. Once the Tories are out of office and Labour are in, I will be, you can quote me on this if I'm not, I will be the most critical person about what Labour are doing if I don't agree with it. I want to see us get better relations with the EU. I want us to rejoin the EU. I want to see a roadmap to universal basic income. I want PR. This stuff, I don't think it's going to come in the next election. No one thinks it's going to come in the next election. But the election after that, it should be in the manifesto. And we are working within the Labour Party to make sure that it does. Because the Labour Party is a democracy. It's not a dictatorship. It is not Keir Starmer's word and then everything has to happen. In the same way that he could say, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do the other. And then when he becomes leader, after the COVID pandemic has actually kicked off, he goes, oh, I can't actually do that stuff. It's not just because of his opinion on it, it's because of the shadow cabinet's opinion on it and the party's opinion, the NEC's opinion on it. We get to vote in Labour on what we want Labour to do. And last year, well, the year before now, in the Labour Party conference, we voted for PR. Because we want it. Us members, we want it. The unions, they want it. And it's just like, we are fighting like David and Goliath at the moment. And we need all the help and all the support that we can get because we're not going to get it from the media. And we're certainly not going to get it from the billionaires, people. We're not going to get it from the billionaires. And they control the minds of vast swathes of the population. Get the Tories out. Number one job of the Labour Party at the moment. And until that happens, I'm going to reserve judgment, okay? Because it's not an easy job. It is not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination. And yeah, there's loads of things that I would have done differently if it was me in charge, but I'm not in charge. So that's the way it is. Right, anyway, I'll vote for you. You stood as an MP. That's Al. Thank you very much. I don't think they'll ever allow me. I'm far too sweary and opinionated. It's funny that, isn't it? In Britain, if you're politically opinionated, you can't get into politics. Anyway, so thank you very, very, very much for the chat and the super chats. And I'll be back on Friday with Morning Brew. But tomorrow at 9:30, we'll have Phil Morehouse, who'll be here with Morning Brew, to talk to you about what's happening in the news and politics in the UK. So thanks very much for watching. Until next time, hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.